Hello, now we're in week 10 and we're going to divide this chapter into motivation. In week 10 and week 11 we'll do emotions. So in motivation, this is really what makes us be properly, if you would, driven to do certain things. And so we're going to look at some of the theories about motivation, and one of course will be the drive reduction theory, and then we're going to look at a couple of other theories about motivation, and we'll also look at some of the social focus of motivation. So not all motivation is driven from within, and we will look at those motivations and those driven, drive foundation of motivation that is based within us, and that would be things like hunger and thirst and that kind of thing. But we'll look at the social motivations as well, in terms of are we motivated by achievement. And so by looking at this element of motivation, we'll look at intrinsic and extrinsic motivation as well, to sort of understand how come sometimes I'm motivated when there's no reward, and how come sometimes I'm only motivated when there is a reward. And so this is an important topic as well, because it helps us understand what makes us move towards goals, or what can facilitate us to achieve goals more successfully. All right, so good luck with this one as well, and I'll see you next week when we look at emotions.
Okay, when we're looking at what is motivation, all of the processes that initiate, direct, or even sustain behavior is what's considered to be motivation. And we have what's called motives, and motives are needs or the desire that direct or energize our behavior, and we're going to look at a bit of both. Now, when we think in terms of motivation, we have intrinsic version of motivation. These are activities that are motivated without any external reward. They're done for the joy of doing them. So for example, looking at some of the examples there, Craig Killenberg, who's with the Me to We, he doesn't do this for the money or the reward or the satisfaction that everybody motivates him. He's doing it because it comes from his heart. Mother Teresa, Terry Fox, these were people who were intrinsically motivated. And so intrinsic is when motives are internal and they push us to act. Alternatively, we could be looking at extrinsic motivation. These are activities that are motivated by the pleasant or unpleasant consequences that follow them. So extrinsic, when motives are external or outside of us, and we call them incentives, and then they pull us or entice us to act. Now, when we look at some of the basic, more biologically based motivations, we need to look at drive reduction theory. And with drive reduction theory, this is where biological needs are create an internal state of tension or arousal, and they're called drives. And that organisms, humans, other mammals, are motivated to reduce these drives. And by reducing the drives, you're achieving homeostasis. So drive reduction theory suggests that a biological need creates an unpleasant state of arousal or tension when called a drive. And this impels the organism, or this impels you or I, to engage in the behavior that satisfies the need and reduces the tension. So homeostasis then, as a way of defining, is a tendency of the body to maintain a balanced internal state in order to promote physical survival. A disruption in homeostasis, for example hunger or thirst, produces a drive, hunger, that motivates you or I to behave in a way that restores homeostasis. We go and eat. And so when we think in terms of our biology, there's a built-in method by which to be motivated and therefore take care of those needs. Now, there are some theories of motivation, and we'll look at some of these theories. Now, arousal, one of the things to pay attention to when we look at what arousal is, and therefore arousal theory, is that it's a state of mental and physical alertness and that prepares the body for action. And so in this theory, you can either be in a no state of arousal, which is essentially when you're comatose, or in a moderate state of arousal, and this is the normal day-to-day activities that we participate in that allows us to get through the day and manage to do everything we're supposed to do. And then there's high arousal. And high arousal is when we're we're excited or highly stimulated. Now, people vary greatly in the amount of arousal that they can tolerate. For some people, the heightened level of arousal experienced when hanging from a precipice or from a rock face like the gentleman is on the right, this offers, this for them is very enjoyable. Others prefer less arousing activities. Now, arousal theory suggests, and we'll take these out there. Arousal theory, it suggests that the aim of motivation is to maintain an optimal level of arousal. People are motivated to maintain an optimal level of arousal. The optimal level is different for all of us. When the arousal is low, for example, you're bored, we have what's called stimulus motives, such as curiosity and activities to motivate us to find some means to increase arousal. So if we're bored and waiting, the stimulus motives are often things like finding little things to do. We'll doodle, we'll fidget, we'll play with our cell phone, all to bring the optimal level, if you will, of arousal to keep us motivated and interested. Now there's a theory, excuse me, stimulus motives, sorry, I have to put that in there. Yerkes-Dodson law, excuse me. The Yerkes-Dodson law states that there are optimum levels of arousal for different tasks. So not every task requires the same optimum level to be motivated and interested. Both insufficient or excessive arousal impairs the performance. Now, a performance on a task is best when arousal level is appropriate to the difficulty of the task. And so generally, if you look at the chart there, you're seeing that simple tasks are performed best with high arousal. Because they're simple, they need more of our attention to stay focused, so there's a higher arousal requirement, whereas moderate tasks are performed best with moderate arousal. And difficult tasks are performed best at low arousal. So we don't need to be comatose on low arousal, but we need to be managing our arousal state so that we can stay focused and stay motivated and stay focused on this more difficult task. So the more high arousal you are when you're trying to do a difficult task, it's more difficult. So for example, you think of a brain surgeon, you rather that he wasn't panicking in high arousal, you want him to be in low, calm state of arousal where he can focus on the task at hand. Now we could also look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the theory accounts for a range of human motivation. Motives at each successive level must be satisfied before higher ones can be considered. For example, physiological needs for water, food, sleep, sex, shelter are satisfied before we can even take in consideration our safety and security needs. So for example, again, now if we're talking about people who are homeless, they're looking after those basic needs of food and water, shelter, and the idea of safety isn't something they can really seriously consider until those basic needs are no longer something they're motivated by and no longer something that they have to be predominantly thinking about. That once we've achieved physiological needs, then we can start thinking in terms and be motivated about safety needs. And not until we have met those needs are we even motivated to be moving into a sense of belonging and love needs. So Abraham Maslow's fulfillment of physiological motives serves as a foundation for social motives, and motivation is the process humans seek to meet their needs. Human needs are hierarchical, from the need of food and shelter at the bottom to self-actualization at the top. And we need to work through lower levels to experience the fulfillment coming from pursuing growth for its own sake. Self-actualization at the very top is the pursuit of self-defined goals for personal fulfillment and growth. Self-actualizers judge honestly and spot quickly when they need to make improvement and when they're falling short on things. They're very genuine people. Now, this building of a hierarchy in terms of motivation just suggests that the focuses that we have on a day-to-day basis, our motivations for communication, our motivation for behavior, is based on what needs are met and what needs are yet to be met. So let's back it up and look at some of our primary drives, and we'll look at thirst first. And when we think in terms of thirst, there's two types. Well, the primary drive really is the unlearned motivation. That arises from the tension that's created by an unmet biological need. So there's extracellular thirst. This occurs when the body tissue loses fluid, such as when you're perspiring while exercising. And then there is intracellular thirst. This occurs when your body loses when your body's cells lose water, such as when you eat salty foods. And these are two, this is combined to make up two versions of the same drive. And that drive is unlearned, and when the homeostasis is broken and thirst is the drive, then we meet that thirst by driving our behavior towards getting water or refreshment. Now, hunger works kind of the same way. With hunger, there's the internal cues, and this is where the internal cues, it motivates hunger by stimulating the hypothalamus in the brain and changes the blood sugar level, and it motivates the hunger drive. Now, the example I have here is really just to show that the internal mechanism that drives hunger is not just your brain saying, hey, I'm hungry. It's your body falling out of homeostasis and starting to trigger the drive to be reduced by motivating you to go get something to eat. Now, external cues can motivate hunger when we see or smell foods that we like. I know when I walk past a bakery that's been baking bread, I have the external cue that goes, you know what, maybe you're hungry. And then lastly, what we can look at are social motives. And these motives are learned motives. They include and are not limited by competition, achievement, success, money, possession, status, love, approval, grades, dominance, power, belonging to groups. Social motives are learned through socialization and cultural conditioning, so really they can be wide and varied. Now, we're going to start with is achievement motives, and under social motives would be achievement. And this is when we look at people who have a high need of achievement, it's a learned characteristic, and it's somewhat stable throughout one's life, that if you were a young child and had high needs to achieve well, chances are as an adult you'd do the same. And you gain satisfaction from striving and attaining a level of excellence. Seek out situations to compete against some sort of a standard, whether it's competing at grades or at making the most money or winning a race, to proving themselves successful. Now, for example, if you could put your imagination to, you're standing in a room that's about 20 feet long, and in this room you've got a series of pegs, 6 pegs. One's right in front of you, one's about 4 or 5 feet in front of you from there, one's about 4 or 5 feet from there, and so on. You would probably find that people with high challenges, if I give you 2 rings and say throw them, chances are, if you are somebody with high needs for achievement, you would want to find something that was challenging, not too easy, but not too challenging, and likely would throw the pegs at the intermediate, or throw the hoops or the rings at the intermediate pegs, probably peg number 3 or number 4. Those with low needs of achievement, they're motivated primarily by desire to avoid failure and seek out easy tasks to avoid failure, like pegs 1 and 2, or very difficult tasks that where almost anyone would fail at, with 5 or 6. And then there's high affiliation needs. This is a second group, and this is an interest in establishing and maintaining relationships with other people, a desire to be with their friends and more of the time and less alone less often. Gender is a significant determinant here. Females tend to spend more significant time with friends than do males. And then low affiliation needs would be more time alone, less need to be with friends. And then lastly, there's power, the tendency to seek impact, to control or to influence others, and to be seen as a powerful individual. And we see this in politicians, We see this in people who lead organizations, and we see this in people who teach. So what we've just basically covered is looking at motivation generally. And what we'll do next week is look at emotions. So good luck, and I hope you've enjoyed yourself. Bye now.